part two of this is to ask you, what did you notice since part one? And I realize that was only 24 hours ago, but I want you to think about that for a moment. And as you do, I'm going to share something with you, because when I do these programs, one of the things that happens to me is it becomes very top of mind for me as well. And what happened for me this morning that brought out my true personality was, there is a friend of mine that lives across the street, and her husband is very ill, and she's had him to the emergency room a couple of times in the last week, and they won't admit him. So this morning she was out walking her dog, and she was holding a telephone, and she said, I'm trying to get through to somebody. I'm going to have to take him back to the hospital. He's suffering so much. And she was walking her little dog, and I said, well, do you want me to walk the dog? No, that's okay. I'll have to stay within range. And I said, well, does he need to poo? That's how we put it around here. And she said, yeah. And I just walked over to her and I said, here, let me do that. And she handed me the dog and her little baggie, and she said, oh, if you don't mind. And I felt like I had my personal thoughts on that were that my powerful personality had come out to help her, and I didn't want to overwhelm her, but I could sense that she has a similar personality. In other words, powerfuls don't like help, and they think they can do everything themselves and they can control things and all those kinds of things. But I've been in a similar situation to what she's going through, and sometimes powerfuls just have to put down their powerfulness, if you will, and let people help them. So I knew in my mind that if she resisted again, I would let her go ahead and walk the dog. But when she said, oh, if you wouldn't mind, are you sure you don't mind? And she still was very, very concerned that it would impose on me. And I just reached for the dog and reached for the bag and took him for a walk, and he did his business, and he wanted to run back home to his mommy, and we got back home, and she was so relieved because she was able to stay at home with the phone and make sure she could get the callbacks from the doctors. So even something like that, that's what I was mentioning yesterday when I said I want you to understand who you really are, because it comes up, kind of sneaks up on you. I think Carol Ann used that term when we were talking earlier. It sneaks up on you, and you need to make sure that you understand where that's coming from. And when that happened this morning, I knew instantly what part of me was coming to the forefront, because I understand myself that well. I also knew that to be kind to her, I might need to back off if it really upset her that I was trying to walk the dog. I didn't think it would, but I just wanted to make sure I wasn't overdoing the powerful personality. So that's a little example for me in the last 24 hours. Now I'm going to ask you to share in the chat box, what have you noticed about personalities in the last 24 hours? I know that's a short time, but in a way that's kind of good, because it should be fresh for you and top of mind. So tell me what you've noticed between yesterday's session and today as you signed on about other people or your own personality or those kinds of things. What has come to mind for you? What has come to light for you? I see Sheila is typing, so hopefully that will pop up here in just a second. And Sabrina is typing. And multiple attendees are typing. I like that about Adobe Connect. It tells me when people are actually responding so that I don't jump into something else before you're ready. Sheila said, just amazing awareness of noticing my overworked strength of wanting to get things done well and expect others to also. You know, it's funny, Sheila, because my husband has those tendencies, and he teaches online college, and he will get so frustrated with some of the students that it's obvious they could do better and they just can't be bothered. And I finally told him, I said, I know that because of your personality, this is the way you think it should be done, but if they're happy with a C, you shouldn't be beating yourself up over the fact that they won't try any harder. And that's kind of what we start noticing, isn't it? That we cannot project our expectations based on our own personalities onto other people. Because unless they're very much like us, they're going to react differently. And then we're going to get frustrated and they're going to get frustrated. So the awareness piece, Caroline and I were talking about before we got started, is huge. You just start to notice things about people. And what I found when I started studying this many, many years ago was it gave me a sense of relief, as silly as that sounds, to understand that they're not trying to get on my nerves. They're not wrong. I'm not right. It's just that we're different. I saw a book title once that said, "I'm not crazy, I'm just not you." And I thought that was very appropriate, because isn't that how we move through life sometimes? We think other people, how can they not get this the way we get this? Well, it's because they perceive the entire world differently than we do. Sabrina said, "I noticed my boss has a perfect, peaceful personality." So there are going to be certain aspects of that that will come to play in the workplace that might be great for some people and might frustrate other people, right? Ada said, different occupations and professions, different personalities, different capacities, perceptions, and attitudes. Absolutely, Ada. Everything about how we move through life is different based on our personality styles. Carol Ann and I have the same combination. But if you put Carol Ann and I in the same situations, it still doesn't mean we're going to react the same, does it? Because everybody is different. Even if they score exactly the same thing, it's only a 40-question test in our big wide world. So of course there are going to be a lot of things that influence how we interact with the world. Things like our past experiences, where we grew up, what kind of a family situation we had. All those kinds of things will affect us, as well as our personalities. But if we start with that core understanding of our personalities, it can open up a whole different world for us as far as interacting with other people more effectively. Deborah said, "My powerful side wants to get it done now. My perfect side feels hurt if it's not appreciated." Absolutely. And my perfect side, Deborah, just to kind of tap in on that, my perfect side gets a little overly obsessed about getting it right, and then my powerful side says, just let it go. And so I actually have a little internal struggle sometimes, because the powerful wants to get it done and the perfect wants to get it right, and sometimes those two trains are not on the same track. So it's good to understand that about myself and know that excellence is good. I do not have to be perfect. As a powerful, I strive for excellence, but I need to let go of the idea that everything has to be perfection, which I tend to work toward. And Lisa said, "It's very important that we not expect others to see things the way we see it. It's better that we learn to work with any personality." And she knows it's easier said than done. Absolutely, that's true. But I hope this understanding that we're gaining yesterday and today will help us do that, to learn to work with any personality. It doesn't mean we agree with them. It doesn't mean that we wholeheartedly support the way they're behaving. It just means that now we have an understanding of them. It also does not mean that we excuse them. For instance, as I mentioned yesterday, if you're a supervisor, you may have a peaceful that works for you, and they may be very dependable and love routine and all those kinds of things. But if they're in their weaknesses, like we talked about yesterday, they could tend toward laziness. Understanding that they're a peaceful does not excuse that, does it? You can't say, well, Sam is a peaceful, so he doesn't have to work as hard as Lisa does. That's not fair. The expectations should still be there, and we need to discipline when we need to, but we need to understand that maybe things are done in a different way or whatever to get to the same result. Diane said, "I found myself trying to assess my husband and kids. Hubby and I are both peaceful. My children are more similar to powerful." Oh, that should be interesting. That would be an interesting dynamic to have in the household, both being peaceful with children as powerfuls. But isn't it nice to know that's where part of that is coming from? Of course, when you have the terrible twos, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's a powerful personality coming out. That's more stage of life, isn't it? But as you see them start to develop, I don't think I told you the story of how I realized when I took this assessment that it was right on target for me, because when I look back at my childhood, I told you that they called me bullheaded. Well, one of the things that happened in my childhood that came to light while I was taking this assessment, I hadn't thought about it for probably 15 or 20 years at that point, was that when I was about 7 or 8 years old, I got mad at my parents about something, who knows what, and I took my puppy and I went into the cornfields. We lived on a farm, and I went into the cornfields several rows deep where they couldn't see me, and I sat there with my puppy. And my family called for me, my mom, my dad, my brother, my sister. And I sort of sat there, and I remember doing this. I sort of sat there thinking, ha, ha, ha. Well, it was ha, ha, ha on me when I came out of that cornfield, because they showed me who had the power in the family, and I was punished for that, as I should have been. But I actually remember thinking that I can do what I want to do. because that was my powerful personality. And unfortunately, it came out a lot in the weakness side as I was growing up. And my parents didn't know anything about any of this stuff, so they didn't recognize any of that as being possible leadership potential or anything like that. It was just a negative to them. So it wasn't until I went into the workplace and I happened to have a boss who recognized that I was fairly strong in some areas, and he started promoting me and those kinds of things. And then I could start to work on the strengths. It took a long time, folks, before I even realized any of that. And I'm still working on that today to stay in my strengths and not let them turn into weaknesses. Ada said, appreciate the differences and similarities, and they help us to work as a team. Absolutely. All of the above. Now I'm going to ask you a question that probably isn't something we really like to think about, but what I want you to think about is, have you become more aware of one of your weaknesses since our first session? Mine is I will call it persistence when it's a strength, but it is bullheadedness and stubbornness when I turn it into a weakness. And Sheila said no, she has not become more aware of one of her own weaknesses. Sheila, you remind me of a session I did face-to-face, and I had a lady get to the bottom 20 questions, and as she started looking them over, I noticed she wasn't checking any of them. And I didn't say anything, but she finally called me over and she said, none of these words on the bottom actually apply to me. And I had to chuckle because they were all weaknesses, and she said none of them applied to her. So have any of you recognized any of your own weaknesses since yesterday? Did it start to come to light for you how some of those wonderful things we talked about could turn into negatives if we overdo them? I want to give you a second to think about that before we move forward. I've sort of been vulnerable and transparent with you today to tell you where my weaknesses come from, and they still happen. That's what's amazing about your core personality, is that even when you understand it, you know yourself inside out, it doesn't stop the behavior from surfacing, does it? It will give you an opportunity to stop it in its tracks and to get a hold of it if you're working in your weaknesses, but it doesn't stop the weakness from coming usually. It gives you that awareness that then allows you to manage that part of your personality. I see several people typing, so I want to give this just a second to make sure we address this before we move on. Deborah said, it surprised me that trust issues were par for the perfect personality. Yes, they really are. And I've never really heard a thorough explanation on that, but if you just think about it logically, the fact that a perfect melancholy wants things to be perfect, and that the longer we live, we know nobody is perfect, then we doubt other people's ability to fulfill our expectations, don't we? And I think that is part of that trust issue all wrapped up, that cautious attitude that we have about developing friendships and relationships. Sabrina said, not everything in life should have a fun part to it. Oh, well, yeah, it can have a fun part, but sometimes we just have to tamper that a little bit, don't we, Sabrina? And Sheila said, it's a good point. They don't go away, just our need of awareness of our weaknesses. Yes, absolutely. They do not go away. We just become more aware of them, and we start to understand how then to manage those weaknesses and the emotions that come with those. So as we talk through this today, if you have your handouts in front of you, on page 1, it just was a reminder for you to write in your primary personality style and your secondary, so you know what your combination is as we're going through today's session. And we already talked about the weaknesses, so that's at the top of page 1. Now I want you to think through that next segment, which says, what professions might these folks be in? And one of the reasons I think this is important is that sometimes when people understand who they are, they actually change professions. You've heard this forever, how somebody might have been, I was telling Carol Ann, we were talking about how if younger people knew more about their personalities, some of them might go into a totally different field than what they are talked into pursuing. Their parents might want them to do something, their guidance counselor might want them to do something, etc. And instead of looking at who they are as a person, they're guided into something that may not be a good fit. And I was telling Carol Ann that I knew an accountant who became an accountant because her family grew this accounting business, and it was just a natural segue for her to go into this accounting business because it was already built up, the income was already there wasn't a big deal about it. But she was a popular, and I think that she might even still be doing this. And she was my accountant for 1 year only, because although she would laugh and have lots of fun and visit, I had to drive to her office, which was 40 minutes away, 3 times during one tax season because she was missing the details. And they were right there, but she would miss them, and I would get the report home and I would go through page and find mistakes, take it back to her. One time she even emailed me the report so I could print it off at home, but then she couldn't remember which pages she had emailed to me. So do you see how that wasn't a good fit for her? She's probably still there because it was the family business and certainly probably makes it work, but it may not be a natural fit, and she could even lose clients as she did me, because I need somebody that can get it done and get it right. So I really need a perfect, powerful as my accountant. And that's what I've had for the past several years. He knows all the rules. We get it done. I had a meeting with him a couple weeks ago. We were done in 15 minutes. He will do my taxes. I will go pick them up. I will go over them. 9 times out of 10, there might be just a little tweak that we need to make. They redo them in a day or two. We're done. So do you see how those professions can make a difference? So what I want to ask you is pick out one of the styles and think of 1 or 2 professions that style might be in, if they're doing it to fit their personality, and then type it into the chat box, if you will. So what kinds of professions? And we're just going to do professions for right now. So you can do the popular, powerful, perfect, or peaceful, and then we're going to look at that. It may be helpful to you as you talk to people, either patrons, younger patrons, or you talk to family members or friends or whomever. It may be helpful to you to understand this so that you can help give people food for thought. I won't say guide them because I don't think that's our place, but maybe give them food for thought. Absolutely, the popular would be in some kind of public relations, or as Jemmy says, Deborah said the public relations, and Jemmy said a comedian or a performer actor, because they love that attention, don't they? They love applause. They love to be the spotlight, in the spotlight. So the popular would be something to do where they're getting a lot of attention. And the perfect would be an editor, absolutely. And it just seems to me, now here's my perfect melancholy. Do you see how this sneaks up on you? Here's my perfect melancholy coming out that I wasn't even expecting to express today. When Deborah said editor, I thought of the many publications I read nowadays. Almost every day in my reading I come across a mistake nowadays, that somebody just wasn't paying attention. And it's frustrating to me as a powerful perfect, because years ago that wasn't the case. But now we have people being hired that really are just hired, I guess, because they seem like nice people, because they miss so many things. Sometimes in one article there will be 3 or 4 mistakes. So absolutely, a highly perfect melancholy would be a good editor. And of course then would have to be balanced with the fact that sooner or later we have a deadline, right? We can't let them work on it forever. Ada said the popular would be in marketing or public relations, the actor, actress, absolutely. Or public office, Sheila said, and I'm thinking maybe the popular. And when I think of, I'm going to go with public office and / politicians, I think they're chameleons, don't you? I think they can show all different sides when it serves them, and I think that's a good lesson for us. I don't want to be manipulative, and I don't want to use this against people, but it does show that we can adapt and we can pull out whatever piece needs to be pulled out, doesn't it? Deborah said, it makes me crazy. It must be that editing thing. Yes, me too. Diane says, I picture popular as real estate agents or a selling profession, particularly if they're popular powerfuls, right, Diane? Because then they take control of situations, they warm up to people, people enjoy being with them, and that powerful piece takes over then and makes the sale, so to speak. Sabrina said, the peaceful perfect might be a librarian. Absolutely. We had a lot of those in the room yesterday where their highest was peaceful or perfect. And Lisa said the popular comedian, the powerful realtor, perfect, the library and accountant, and the peaceful a psychologist or a librarian. I'm going to address Lisa's comment about the psychologist. That is right on target, because psychologists love to listen. They actually even make good conflict mediators because they can listen so well. They don't want to be in conflict. Remember, they don't like chaos and all that kinds of stuff. But they're good mediators because they'll listen to both sides and help both sides see what's being said. So they do a good job at that, even though they don't like to be in the midst of conflict. And powerfuls are often managers. They don't always make great managers because a lot of times if they're working in their weaknesses, that comes across as being the bulldozer we talked about yesterday, doesn't it? So powerfuls can make wonderful leaders if they tap into their strengths, but sometimes they become leaders because they're powerful, and it doesn't really serve them well as a good leader. If you've ever heard the term servant leadership, it's a big, I'll say, movement that's been around for a couple of decades, but it talks about the fact that there's a book out that our radiation oncologist referred me to by Simon Sinek, and it's called Leaders Eat Last. And it goes by the premise that, for instance, I think it's the Marine Corps, where when you go into their mess hall, their cafeteria, if you will, you'll see the highest ranking people waiting in the background until everybody else gets finished, with the idea that you should be serving the other people and you should not be getting special treatment because you're the leader. That's kind of that thought process. Sabrina said, I have to rethink that law school thing now. I'm a popular. And it doesn't hurt to think about it, does it? But if it's what you're drawn to, it doesn't mean that you can't be good at it. It just means that you need to know the weaknesses that you might need to address as you're moving through school. Because law is very much about precedent and all that kind of stuff, so it's very detail-oriented, isn't it? A lot of research, a lot of pulling out minute details. And that might be appealing to you because you like the idea of digging, and that might be the curiosity piece of the popular that enjoys that. So definitely, I think rethinking anything is a good idea. I wouldn't want to say that you're not to go into law school because you're a popular, because there are certainly popular lawyers that have a different perspective and a different niche, if you will, in the marketplace. And Ada said the perfect melancholy could be a research scientist. Absolutely. Sitting in their office all alone, researching. I have a friend who's an appeals court judge. An appeals court judge never sees or rarely sees the people. At least our friend didn't. What he did was he took the case, both sides of the case, because it's an appeals, okay, it's an appeal, and he would take both sides of the case and spend days and days and days locked up in his office finding precedent, is the law being followed, all those kinds of things, and he thrived on that. Because it was a very alone kind of thing. It took a lot of research and a lot of details. The powerful might be a politician. And Deborah said the peaceful could be an academic advisor. Absolutely. And you would want them to be the peaceful perfect, probably, wouldn't you? You'd want them to have a lot of details and information on the things that they're advising on, and then the peaceful would just help guide somebody. If they're a peaceful popular, which is another combination, they could fall into the trap of trying to make kids like them, so without realizing what they're doing. So all of the above, you're all right on target. I had down a couple of the things that you all had mentioned. Somebody mentioned a comedian is a popular, the waitress. How many of us have gone to a restaurant in the last 30 days where the waitress must have been a perfect melancholy because there was no smile, there was no interaction? If I'm hiring a waitress, I'm looking for somebody with a popular personality. I can train for skills, but I need somebody that makes people feel warm and welcome and want them to come back. A clown. I have a friend who was an elementary school teacher, which fits right in with the popular, doing all the activities and all those things, and when she retired, she became a professional clown because she still loves the interaction with the kids, everybody having fun, all those kinds of things. Receptionist, you know, you call the place and they say, "Good morning, it's a great day here at XYZ Company," and you're thinking, oh my goodness, I'm going to have a lot of problems here if that's the person they've got on their phone. So if you hire the popular and she says, "Good morning, it's a great day here at XYZ Company," you already have a different attitude. So sales, because they make those relationships, and the actor that you mentioned. The powerful, I have down, look at all these fun things: warden, policeman, CEO, drill sergeant, principal, and sales. Now we've got sales in two categories, and of course there are a lot of professions that would overlap personalities, aren't there? If you think about the popular, they are good in sales because they develop relationships and people like them. If you think about the powerful, they can be very effective in sales because they love goals and they love winning and they love the competition that creates, even if it's just with themselves. So you start to see where there are some pretty big differences in those personalities, and yet they could be very effective in the same profession. The perfect, the accountant, the pilot, the engineer, the banker, the neurosurgeon, the librarian. Think about a pilot. you don't want your pilot getting on the plane and saying, okay, let's rock and roll. Let's have some fun here. Now, it is fun when they have a bit of a personality, the pilot. And on Southwest and places like that, they've found the people that are very detail-oriented but can still express a personality. And so that's kind of fun. But if I had to choose, I'm going to pick the person that is so thorough about the checklist, there is not one I left undotted if I have my pilot. And it's certainly with a neurosurgeon, you don't want somebody that's taking the easy way out, right? You don't want a peaceful being your neurosurgeon. So all of those things would be very natural draws for a high perfect melancholy. Now, if those scores are lower, then they have a little more flexibility of what kind of profession they're going to be in. But the higher you are in a category, remember, the more tendencies you have in that category. And the peaceful, of course, something that's not in the limelight, the support person, the forest ranger, the radiologist, not the radiation technician that has to do the radiation because people are sick and upset and those kinds of things, but the radiologist that's reading the x-rays, that's reading the mammogram, that's reading the scan or whatever, and just writing a report on it, because there's not a lot of interaction there. So we start to see that we can have a lot of fun with knowing about personalities, but it can also have a major effect on what we do in life. So what kind of vacation do you think they would go on? At the bottom of page 1, just jot one down and then type it into the chat box if you would. What kind of vacation might they want to go on? And I'm going to give you some visual clues here and see if that helps. Diane says the popular's going to go to Vegas. Yes, ma'am. And stay up all night and go to all the shows and laugh and have a good time and be around all those people. And for me, being the powerful perfect, to me, that is a place I don't want to be. I went to Vegas once and I spent $10 in quarters and I thought, this is a big waste of money. And I left. And I'd rather go read. Jemmy said, perfect wants to go on a vacation with museums and arts and culture and such. Absolutely. Kind of a study thing, right, Jemmy? When you think about the perfect melancholy, it's kind of a study, reflective kind of a thing. And the popular would want to go on a cruise. I have, God bless her, I have a friend who's highly popular. Her husband is a peaceful. She drags him to every cruise that comes into port. And it's funny. This is hysterical. It just kind of highlights the way populars think. She will bring her pictures from a cruise, and all the pictures are of people. They're not of anything on the boat. They're not of anything that they stopped to see on the islands. They're not of anything except the people, which kind of just reinforces the fact that she's a popular, doesn't it? Because it's all about the people for her. A vacation to the Caribbean, if it's a very active vacation especially, Ada said, Sabrina, the peaceful might want to just go to the beach and stretch out. Funny Sabrina mentioned the beach, because I had a fellow that worked for me when I was in my corporate job, and he was an assistant in the sales department. He didn't actually go out and do sales, and now I see why. A great guy, very steady, very dependable. But he came into me right after I took over that department, and he said, I hate to ask you this so soon after you took over, but I always go on vacation the last 2 weeks of July. Would that be a problem? And I said, no, we're not very busy during that time. Go ahead. I said, so where are you going? And he said, Myrtle Beach. And I said, oh, where are you going to stay? And he said, the same place we stay every year, a condo at blah, blah, blah. And I said, oh, what do you do when you're down there? And he said, we go to the beach. And I said, what do you do the second day? Because to me, I'm thinking, okay, you go for the first day. He said, no, we go to the beach every day. I said, oh, do you read a lot when you're down there? No. I said, do you take your laptop to do something? No. He goes to the beach, he lays on the beach, and that's all he does. And for me, I'm thinking, just shoot me, because that does not sound like something I could withstand after a day. Now, one day of it sounds kind of good when I'm really stressed and really have been working hard. The one day of it sounds great. But the second day, the powerful perfect in me is saying, let's go. What are we going to do? What are we going to accomplish? All those kinds of things. So do you see how different that could be in a family? And Deborah agrees, the peaceful's going to chill on the beach. But what if you're married or your significant other is a powerful? You're going to have to make some compromises or take turns probably, aren't you? The popular might like to go skiing and hang around the lodge and have hot chocolate with everybody afterwards. The powerful might want to go mountain climbing to prove they can. And the peaceful might want to go on a cruise as well because, you know what, it's just a lot of food floating around. We're just floating around with a lot of food. So it really is, I think, extremely interesting to understand these things and can be so helpful even in your own family dynamics when things like this are happening where you're planning a vacation and you just don't understand why one person would want to go here. It makes no sense to you and you can't even see how that would be enjoyable. It's because we have different personalities, and that's what comes to light when we think about what would we like to do if we have some time off. For the powerful, they may not even go on a vacation. I haven't been on a vacation for a couple of years. Part of that's because of my husband's health issues, but part of it is because when we go on vacation, we usually work. We just can't stand the thought of things getting behind, and plus we get bored. He takes his guitar, I take reading material, but you can only do so much of that before you get bored. So it's just funny how those things knowing about those things can help you be a little more engaged in life and understand other people's perspectives. So on page 2, I ask you about their work environment. I think that's really important for us to understand, not only for ourselves, but if we are a supervisor, it helps us understand what these people will enjoy. And what I'm thinking of here is maybe something like, for the popular, the work environment they're looking for is people-oriented and fun. So go ahead and pick one of the other 3, powerful, perfect, or peaceful, and come up with a phrase that would define the work environment that they might enjoy. And go ahead and type it into the chat box. Deborah said the peaceful would enjoy quiet and orderly. Remember yesterday how many people in the room were peacefuls? Several. Highest percentage in our room yesterday. Drawn to what they thought was going to be a quiet and orderly work environment of a library. And really, if you think about it, still is compared to a lot of different workplaces. I did some work in a library in Alabama, and they built a new facility in 2008 or 9, I believe. And when they built the facility, they built a 300-seat auditorium that they use to have cultural events in. They have plays come through, they have musical acts come through, comedians, magicians, those kinds of things, and they book those well in advance, and their season tickets go on sale and sell out within 24 hours, and that's a part of the library. It's in the library. Then they also built what they call their gallery, which is a walkway between the library and their beautiful cafe. The gallery has art pieces, overstuffed chairs, all those things. Just a very relaxing, artistic, reflective kind of place to be. And within that art gallery space, it's not really an art gallery, it's sort of like a hallway, a huge wide hallway, breezeway if you will, to the next place. But within that, they actually built a quiet room. They built a separate room enclosed where people can go and sit and read with the door closed. It's all glass, but the door is closed and there's no noise. You're not allowed to talk in there. You're not allowed to use your cell phone. You just go in there and enjoy the peace and quiet. Many years ago, I was at a library, I think it was in Chicago, and they actually had built a quiet room, but in the quiet room, they had a fireplace and a waterfall. And it was almost like being in a cabin in the woods. Incredible. And people would go in there with no phones, no nothing, and they wouldn't even talk to each other while they were in there because it was meant for that. So you can see that kind of a work environment coming into play in a lot of pieces of the library. Not all, certainly not in the children's department most of the time and so forth, but in many places in the library, it would still be considered quiet. And Lisa said the same thing, peaceful, librarian, quiet. Jemmy said the powerful wants a productive day where everyone's doing what they should. That's exactly right, Jemmy. Now think about that for just a second. You hear how that is worded. Powerful wants a productive day where everyone's doing what they should. And the thing for a powerful is, what they're thinking is, what you should do is what I asked you to do, and you should do as much of it as I do. Years ago, before I knew anything about personalities, I worked with my company and I moved to Louisiana to be an office manager at a new facility there. And after 7 months, I got bored. I had done the payroll. I was doing everything that needed to be done as part of the office. I would even make the folks in the factory their coffee in the morning to give myself something to do, restock their snack machines. I did everything I could do because I wanted to be productive. And when I decided to leave in 7 months, we did a search for somebody to replace me. And the lady came in and replaced me. Very nice lady, very capable. But after about 2 months, the fellow that ran that facility called me and he said, I think I'm going to have to let her go. And I said, why? And he said, because by Friday, she doesn't have done what you had done by Wednesday. And that wasn't to pat me on the back or anything. He was just saying she's not as productive as I expected her to be. And I said, does she do her work well? And he said, everything's always right. I said, does she come to work every day? Yes, and she's always on time. I said, then get her some help. And I didn't even understand personalities at the time, but what I got from his conversation was she was just as good as I was. She just didn't happen to be as fast as I was, which is not a negative thing at all. It's just that she was thorough and that's how she processed things. And so he ended up getting her help, and she stayed for 7 or 8 years until she started a family. So that productive day for one person may be a whole different thing for somebody else, but the powerful expects it to be at the same level they produce, right? And that's when we start to understand the differences. Peaceful wants the drama-free zones, absolutely. And Sabrina said the powerful would enjoy a challenging environment. Ada said the powerful would be a manager. The perfect might be the accountant. Well, those are more professions, but when we talk about the actual environment they're working in, a manager would have control. The accountant would need to be detail-oriented and precise. The counselor would need to be empathetic and compassionate and those kinds of things. So when we talk about work environments, it's the kind of environment we're going to create. Sheila said the peaceful nature walk, backroom work in the library near a window. Yes, near a window looking out at the trees and the squirrels and the birds and all those kinds of things, because it gives them that reflective kind of downtime feeling, if you will. They'll still get it done. That's just where they feel comfortable. They don't need to be out in the middle, in the limelight, in the center of all the activity. Diane said the perfect would be they want detail-oriented and they want a closed office. That's a great point, because how many places now are doing away with doors completely? I think I mentioned yesterday Susan Cain's book on introverts called Quiet. She has started a revolution to try to get schools and companies and organizations to reconsider forcing people to always work in teamwork. And her thought process is, if you've got an introvert, which is often the perfect melancholy or the peaceful phlegmatic, if you've got introverts working for you, allow them to do a process she calls think, pair, and share. In other words, allow those people time to think, maybe in a closed office or a conference room or someplace where they can go and get away, and then they can share it with one other person in the pair, and then they might share it with the group. But a closed office is really important to a perfect melancholy, or at least a closed environment or a cubicle that has walls high enough that I don't have to see everybody else and hear everybody else. So right there, just that little minute piece of information can tell us that can get on people's nerves, can it? If you're a perfect melancholy and you are thrust out into the environment every single day, every hour of every single day, it's going to rub you raw, because you need that quiet, behind-the-scenes, detail-oriented place. Lisa said the powerful might be the by-the-book drill sergeant. Absolutely. I met a lady the other day who's a librarian who used to be in the armed services, and I can't remember which branch, but she was a drill sergeant. And she's not mean, she's not offensive at all, but you can just tell the way she moves and the way she answers questions that she's very self-assured and she's very much in control. Remember, that's what we talked about the powerful wants, to be in control. Ada said the work environment for most of the professions and occupations I mentioned would be the office. Yes. Yeah. And the environment of the office can be drastically different, can it? In one office it can be lots of fun and almost party activities, and in another office it can be quiet and reserved, and in someplace else it can be very detail oriented, those kinds of things. So what kind of work environment? I have down for the powerful the goal oriented environment, get down to business, and as somebody said, be productive. That's what the powerful is looking for. The perfect is looking for the structure, as some of you mentioned, the quiet, the schedules, having policies that people abide by so we all know the rules. Do you see the word library embedded there? It's not really. I'm just making that up. But it should be, shouldn't it? Because when you think of structure, quiet, schedules, and policies, although again, we can agree that libraries are not quite like they used to be, they still have a lot of structure, they still have schedules, they still have policies, all of the above. As I'm doing a lot of research over the last year for the Leadership Institute, I'm reading a lot of current articles that are talking about doing away with a lot of the policies and the structure of a library in order to stay viable in a community. That people don't want to hear, I can't give you that meeting room because we don't lend our meeting rooms to anything other than nonprofit organizations. That came up in a program one day several years ago, and I said, okay, so the corporations that are paying taxes that support the library are not permitted to use the meeting room, right? And this person looked at me like and said, oh my gosh, she said, we're going to have to go back and have a talk about this. And those are the kinds of things we're looking at as libraries now to try to draw the whole community in and be more of a community resource rather than just a depository for books like we talked about. So the structure and the quiet and the schedules and policies are all things that people would enjoy if they're perfect melancholies. And the peaceful, of course, wants something that's consistent and peaceful and kind of in the background. I have a friend who bought a business, an RV business, many years ago, and he put his wife at the front desk, and his wife is a perfect, powerful, highly perfect, fairly high in the powerful, not much going on in the popular at all, very little peaceful. He put her on the front desk. He would come out and hear somebody roaming around the showroom, and he would come out and she'd be in the back office playing solitaire. Eventually the business went under, and now I don't think it was her fault, but I think the fact that that thought process wasn't there about what kind of person do you want greeting somebody that's going to spend tens of thousands of dollars on a vehicle or on a, whatever you want to call that, a motorhome. It wouldn't be somebody that wanted to be in the back office playing solitaire. She didn't want to be in the limelight. She wanted it to be peaceful and her work to be consistent, so she would just go in the back room, do some books, and then stay back there. So it makes a big difference in what we're looking for, doesn't it? Okay, at the bottom of page 2, we're going to talk about, this is in the middle actually, at the bottom below our work environment, we're going to talk about what kinds of questions they might ask, because this might help you in an instance where somebody's totally different than you and they ask a question that you think they have no business asking, or why didn't they ask, or whatever. So think about those 4 styles. What kinds of questions might they ask? For the popular sanguine, I'll give you the first one. They're going to be kind of unusual questions, a little bit more nosy than maybe somebody else would ask, a little bit more odd, digging a little deeper than somebody else might ask. So about the other 3, what kinds of questions might they ask? I love that, Cheryl. Yeah, they're going to say, are you pregnant? They're just going to be that blunt about it. I had my highly popular training friend one day a few years ago. There was an opening in a corporate training department at a university, and the person that ran that department had called me to ask me if I would be the interim director, and my schedule simply wouldn't allow it. I wanted to help him out, but I just couldn't do it with all the other jobs that I had. And I hadn't mentioned it to anybody because I hadn't taken it, and it was not a big deal. So we're sitting at lunch one day, and as soon as we sat down with our food, and there was another lady with us, as soon as we sat down, this friend of mine looks at me and she goes, so, I hear they offered you the corporate training job. And I wanted to say, what business is that of yours? But I know who she is. I know her personality. And I smiled and I said, yeah, but I'm not going to be able to help him. And I just changed the subject. And it kind of, I could see her kind of deflate because she wanted to dig around a little bit and find out what was going on and if I, how much would it have paid and all that kind of stuff. And it was just kind of nosy. It was very, very intrusive almost from my standpoint. If I had been another popular, I would have jumped into that conversation with no hesitation, but for me, it felt intrusive. Sabrina said, is there going to be food or music? Are there cute guys? Is there something, that's something the popular would ask. Yes, you're right. Are there cute guys, and will there be food or music? And if there are any guys in the room, we apologize. Deborah said the perfect would want details and clarification. Yes, they're going to ask specific questions and lots of them probably. Lisa says the popular would say, why are you so calm? Is everything okay? Are you depressed? Are you having fun? Aren't you having fun? Right, Lisa? All of those questions. What's wrong? Lighten up. You okay? All of those things would come from the popular. And if you're asking a perfect that, they're thinking, just leave me alone. Sheila said the perfect melancholy doesn't ask much, doesn't like being nosy because they don't like others questioning them. Absolutely. So they will ask those detail-oriented questions just to do what you've asked them to do or whatever. Diane says the perfect would say, who moved my pens and why is the calendar in the wrong place? I love that. It's true. They will sense that, won't they? They walk into their workspace and there's a piece of paper that's on the wrong side of the desk and they'll know that because everything was perfect when they left. Ada said the popular would say, are you daydreaming? Are you able to stay focused on your work? That might be a question somebody would ask the popular for sure, Ada, because they're going to be daydreaming, aren't they? They're usually not real work focused when they're thinking about fun things. So it's amazing you can key in a little bit to someone's personality just based on the kinds of questions that they ask. The popular might say, are you coming to the party? Are we having drinks? Are we going to eat first? Are we having games? How are we decorating? They're not going to say how much are we spending because they don't care. But the perfect might ask, how much should we spend on the decorations, right? The powerful is going to ask very direct and to the point questions. If I want to know something, I'm just going to ask you. And other people might actually think, I can't believe she asked that. Same thing as the popular, but the popular is asking more nosy questions. I'm going to ask questions that get my results that I need. Cheryl says, I think the perfect melancholy doesn't ask questions because they don't really care unless it affects them directly. That's probably true too, and that would probably be true for the peaceful as well. Because if it's not going to affect me, I don't need to know. And the perfect might only ask those questions that they need to get answered so that they can do their job perfectly, right? So the powerful is going to be direct and to the point. The perfect is going to have maybe a long list if it's something that applies to them. They're not going to have a long list about what you did over the weekend because, as Cheryl said, they don't care. It doesn't affect them. The popular might have a long list of questions about what you did over the weekend. Were there any people at the party? Was John there? Did he have his girlfriend with him? Those kinds of things. The perfect really doesn't care. But if it pertains to something they're going to try to do and be good at, they're going to have a long list of detailed questions because it involves them and they want to make sure whatever it is perfect when they're done. The peaceful, as I mentioned, won't have a lot of questions, again, because it really doesn't involve them. They don't want to get involved necessarily, but when they do have a question, it's going to be a little more personal, and it's not going to be personal in a nosy way. It's going to be more personal in a caring and sensitive way, because these are the people that want harmony. Remember, they want to get along. So if they feel like something's bothering you, they're going to try to draw that out of you, not to prove you wrong, but to make sure you feel okay and that everybody's still happy, because that's important to them. They want to get along. So now if we think about it, that would be more relationship oriented, wouldn't it? The popular just wants information. And they'll probably go tell somebody else after they get the answers. The peaceful is just focused more on the relationship itself as they're asking those questions. Okay, how do we actually communicate with these people? We know quite a bit about them right now. How would we communicate with them to be more effective? So as you're thinking and names have popped into your head yesterday and today about who these people might be in your environment, actual names of people, now you can start to understand how to interact with them so that your communication is more effective. So with the popular sanguine, you're going to be friendly. Now, for those of us who are not popular sanguines, we think, you know what, I don't have time to be friendly. I've got work to do. For the popular, they're thinking, what's so wrong with just being nice? Lisa says the popular says be fun or enthusiastic. Yes. So you're going to be friendly with them, aren't you? You're going to ask them, what did you do over the weekend? Did you get to go to that party you were thinking about? Are you going to your cousin's wedding? Those kinds of things. Now, the natural tendency for a powerful that walks up to a popular is, did you get the report done? So do you hear what might need to be done here? I might need to adjust my attitude as a powerful when I approach a popular and be willing to engage in some chit-chat and some small talk to be more friendly with them. If they need details, put them in writing, because details are not their thing. They can do it. There are populars that are very organized because they've adapted to that and they know they have to be detail-oriented, but it's not their natural way of being. If you want to start a conversation with the popular, draw them out with open-ended questions, and open-ended questions are those that are not answered with a simple yes or no. It might be, tell me about the party Saturday night. It wouldn't be, are there a lot of people at the party? Because they might answer yes or no. Chances are they probably would still give you a little more information because they are populars and they like to talk. But when you ask them an open-ended question, you get a lot more. And Sabrina says give them food too. So if you want to communicate with them, hand them a donut first, right, Sabrina? That probably works for all four styles, really, if you think about it. The popular sanguine might get upset when you are too detail-oriented with them, if it's stuff that they don't need to know. So think about this. Let's say you work for a popular sanguine, and you are a perfect melancholy, and you write your report, and you go through all of this stuff, and when the popular says to you, so what did you find out? You say, well, there were 312 people that used those services last year. Most of them were on Tuesday between 5 and 7. When we checked the ages, they were between age 50 and 60. And you go through all of these details, and all the popular wants to know was it a success? So being too detail-oriented can frustrate them. Monopolizing the conversation can frustrate them because, remember, they like the attention. So sometimes when you have two populars talking, they don't even hear each other. And I'm not doing that. I'm not saying that to be derogatory because we all have our weaknesses, don't we? But for populars, it's very much about they're thinking about what excites them. What did they have fun with? And that's what they want to share with you. So they like to be the center of the conversation. So if you monopolize the conversation, it's not going to be as much fun for them when you do that. If you focus only on, quote, business, on your library business, on the details of that business, then that's not fun. And they're thinking, gosh, is that all that person ever talks about? It's so annoying. So that's the popular sanguine. At the bottom of page 2, we start with the powerful choleric. Be brief and direct. Now, think about this. You've got a popular and a powerful trying to have a conversation, trying to discuss something. Two totally different perspectives on how this conversation should go. The powerful wants to be brief and direct. They don't want to talk about what you did at the movies last night. The popular wants to have some chit-chat and talk about personal life things instead of the details of what we're supposed to be discussing. So be brief and direct if you're dealing with a powerful. Don't be too touchy-feely, at least not right away. I mean, I have clients I hug, but I didn't hug them the first time I met them as a powerful. So being a little bit too touchy-feely to them means you're not paying as much attention to the facts and the details and those kinds of things. And when you deal with a powerful, you want to know your facts. You don't want to come in and say, well, I think this is what happened, because the powerful will be all over that. They want to know that you know your facts. Lisa said the peaceful perfect is health conscious. Yes. So they're not going to want that donut probably. They would want maybe carrots and celery. The powerful. What will upset them? Being too personal, too fast. So the popular starts talking about 6 husbands and 12 children and all of those kinds of things. I'm making that up, obviously, but they're talking about a lot of personal stuff. And the powerful's thinking, I don't even know you. Why are we talking about this already? So being too personal, too fast can upset the powerful. We are now on page 3, by the way. Seeming to be unsure of yourself. If you are taking a report into a powerful supervisor and you say, well, I looked this up, but I wasn't really sure what you want. You want to step back from that and say, here's what I found. They can tell you if they want something different, but if you come in unsure, they don't trust you to have spent the time necessary to get them the results they needed. So seeming to be unsure will upset them, and not sticking to the facts. Remember, we talked yesterday about the popular being a storyteller and likes to embellish and doesn't do it intentionally, but just that's what they perceive. When the popular comes in and talks to the powerful and says, I know we can do this program again. We had 30 people at the last one, and you know by the report that there were only 11, then there's an issue of not trusting that person, even though they're not doing it on purpose. It seemed like there were 30 people to them. But if you don't stick to the facts, the powerful starts to wonder about whether they can trust you or not to do what they need to get done. And they, remember, like control, so now they feel like they're a little bit out of control because you've not stuck to the facts. So stick to the facts when you're talking to a powerful. The perfect melancholy. What do you need to do? You need to, first of all, be patient. Ada said if they're compassionate regarding work and they need to get their point across, they will usually understand and know the difference between the different personality styles of the workers and use them so that the work can get done instead of using drastic measures. Good leaders do that, Ada. And there are a lot of good leaders out there. There are also a lot of leaders that don't care what your personality is because they've never taken into consideration that they should be compassionate and that they should care about the differences. And in their mind, you will do what I ask you to do the way I asked you to do it. So that kind of comes into play, especially with a powerful. It's my way or the highway. So although we would love for them all to be compassionate, the fact is different personalities, if they're working in their weaknesses, don't find that trait very easily. They don't pull that up very easily. So it's a great way to be if we can find those kinds of leaders, but it's not always the case, is it? The perfect melancholy, you would want to be patient. Why do you think I say be patient with a perfect melancholy when you're communicating with them? What does patience have to do with the perfect melancholy? Yes, Ada, that's correct. If they're compassionate, yeah, good word there. Yes, Cheryl, they do absorb sometimes with no reaction. They're processing, aren't they? And yes, they're threatened by a loud, direct person, absolutely. And the patience, yes, exactly, Lisa. It takes time for them to process. It's not that they're slow. They absolutely get it, but remember, perfect melancholies are thinking internally a lot of times, and so they're processing it, they just aren't verbalizing it. My friend who is the popular will tell you if it comes into her head, it comes out of her mouth. That's not what happens with a perfect melancholy. It comes into their head, they massage it a little bit, they think about it a little bit, they ponder it a little bit, and then they decide to speak about it. So when you're communicating with them, and as Deborah said, they want the details to take time to process the information, and you're communicating with them. If you're the powerful and you're demanding something on the spot, you're both going to be disappointed. The perfect melancholy is going to be disappointed because they can't give you their best if you demand something on the spot, and the powerful is going to be disappointed because they think everybody should be ready to respond on the spot if they're not thinking about personalities. And in reality, most people move through life without giving any consideration to the fact that somebody might be different than them, don't they? That's what we're talking about here. Most people are not attending a webinar today about personalities or taking an assessment or going to a class or whatever or reading a book about it. Most people go through pretty well with blinders on when it comes to personalities. So if you are working with a perfect melancholy, be patient with them. Sheila said by the time we get it, the conversation's moved on and people wonder what the heck they're talking about now. Exactly. That's why if you're in a meeting, you need to alert people ahead of time with an agenda and so forth of what you're going to discuss so that the perfect melancholy already has processed it when they get there. And Sabrina said the perfect, you need to be a good listener and to find out how they want things to be done. The perfect way also takes notes, absolutely, because they want to make sure they catch everything. When you're communicating with the perfect melancholy, you want to this time you want to stay focused on the details. So the popular doesn't want you to get wound up in the details, but the perfect wants you to be very specific. Yes, exactly, Sheila, the agenda. When I do my meeting webinars and so forth, one of the things we talk at length about is about an agenda and how thorough it should be to make your meeting so much more effective. And for a perfect melancholy, that's an exact example of what needs to be done. They need to think about it ahead of time. Use data. You're welcome. Use data and factual information. And if you need any more information on that, Sheila, just let me know. Use data and factual information when you're working with perfect melancholy, because that's what they process. They don't want to hear about feelings and emotions and people so much as they want to hear about what do the statistics show. What are the facts here? So what upsets them? Well, if you're too flexible, we talked about that yesterday. The popular loves flexibility. The perfect melancholy says if there's a rule, we ought to stick to the rule. So think about that. When you are waiving all of your policies in the library, but the perfect melancholy is adhering to them, that's because that's the only way they understand the world. If there's a rule, why aren't we following it? If the meeting's at 9, why didn't we start at 9? That's the only way. It just doesn't make sense to them otherwise. So if you're always bending the rules, maybe somebody needs to step back and say, we need to change the rules. Instead of making the perfect melancholy feel like the ogre or the bad person, because they're following the rules. If you remember the story I told you about the peaceful supervisor that couldn't discipline the person and decided she would let them be their free spirit self, well, now you're creating a situation where there's a good chance other employees that worked for that supervisor are perfect melancholies. So now you've made them think about, why should I have to follow the rules if that person doesn't? But they probably will go ahead and follow the rules most of the time unless they get so fed up they just can't stand it anymore. But as they're following the rules, remember the melancholy piece? They're going to get resentful. They're going to be frustrated. They're not going to do their best work because they have to follow the rules and this other person doesn't. So being too flexible will upset a perfect melancholy. Constant reminders to them. Did you get that done? Do you have that down for Tuesday? Are you going to be done by 2 o'clock? Did you do it on blue paper? If you gave them specifics to begin with, they'll do it because they want to do it well. It would be very rare if you gave them a list of what you wanted done for them not to do the way you asked them to do it. So reminding them constantly makes them feel criticized. It makes them feel as if you do not trust them to do a good job. And not being accurate. If you're working with them on something and you guess at things or whatever, or they find out you didn't do the research on it, you just put down a number, that's going to be very frustrating for them because accuracy is so important to a perfect melancholy. The perfect melancholy is the one that looks at the checkbook to balance it and finds a 2-cent error and spends the next 3 hours to find it. Because that's just the way they perceive life. And I know that because I am one. It's one of the areas I've had to let go a little bit on. The first time I ever put up a PowerPoint on a webinar and it had a mistake in it, I almost fell through the floor. I was so upset because my perfect melancholy said, that should have been perfect. It's a PowerPoint. All those people are looking at it. And then I had to forgive myself and say, you know what? The content was exceptionally good and everything else about the PowerPoint was great. It didn't feel very funny, but it's true. You know, occasionally we do make mistakes. Even when we proofread it 7 times, we still make mistakes. And I was just appalled. But then I thought, you know what? The program itself was excellent. It took me days to figure that out. You know, and convince myself of that. So not being accurate is a problem for them. The peaceful phlegmatic. What do you do to communicate effectively with them? You need to be specific. If you tell a peaceful phlegmatic, I'd like that done as soon as possible, for them, that will be next Thursday, maybe. If you gave it to a powerful to get it done as soon as possible, it'd probably be done by this afternoon. Do you see the differences here? Do you see why the workplace can be so fraught with tension and friction? Because if we don't understand these things, we don't communicate with that person the way they need to be communicated with, and so we're all disappointed. So you need to be specific. If you say as soon as possible, you're going to get it whenever they get around to it. Approach through the benefits to them. You know what? If we get this done by Friday, we're going to go have lunch, or I'm going to bring a pizza, or then you can start working on that other project you want to do or whatever, because that creates an internal motivation for them. Remember, they tend to take the easy way. So if you can show them something that benefits them when you're communicating with them, they'll be more likely to do it and get it done. Here's something we missed. So if you have your handouts there and you're taking notes on your handouts, circle item C under Peaceful Phlegmatic. Get their opinion. This is something we forget to do because they've been in the background. They've been quiet. They haven't joined in. And so we don't solicit their opinion because, for instance, a powerful is thinking, hey, if they want to speak up, let them speak up. I asked for opinions and they didn't say anything. But if you're a good leader and you're the powerful leading this discussion, you will know that the peaceful sitting in the corner has not contributed, and you'll say, so Jane, what do you think? Because it's been on the agenda, they know it's coming up in this meeting, and you're going to get their opinion. Even if you're just sitting around discussing something, pay attention. The peaceful is often peaceful. They're sitting, not contributing. It doesn't mean they're not thinking. It means they're not speaking. So you need to draw them out and get their opinion, because what happens is if you don't get their opinion and you do something they don't approve of, they're going to be more than happy to stir the pot and get people upset about it. The fact that they're peaceful doesn't mean that they won't be negative, because they might be. So if you get their opinion in advance, then you can incorporate that into whatever decision you're making or whatever the discussion is about. What will upset them? Skipping that discussion. Because you make them feel like they're not part of the team, and that's one of their core needs, is to feel like they're part of the team. Powerful doesn't need to feel like they're part of a team. They really don't care. The peaceful needs to feel like they're part of a team. They want everybody to be happy and everybody to get along, and if you skip the discussion, they're not part of the team. Sometimes, not always, but putting them in charge will upset them because they really don't want to be in charge. One of the reasons sometimes they don't volunteer for things that they might be really good at is they're afraid they'll get more of those things. And they really don't want to be put in charge, and they really don't want to be given all that responsibility. Or insisting on instant answers. Here too, they like to process. So the peaceful, remember, is kind of going back and forth, deciding which way is going to be the best way. They're not really analyzing it so much from a detail perspective as they are from a feeling perspective. But an instant answer isn't going to be satisfactory for them. So when you expect them to just on the spot answer the question you just asked, and it's a meaningful question, that's going to be frustrating for them. They may or may not even give you an answer. So the next thing we're going to talk about is something a lot more personal for each individual, and that is what would contribute to their self-worth, what makes them feel good about themselves. So answer that question for one of those styles and type your style into the chat box along with what you think contributes to their self-worth. What makes them feel good about themselves? Cheryl said compliments, and I'm thinking she means for the popular, and that's absolutely true. They like to be complimented. Deborah said perfect likes to be told it's a job well done. They like to do the job well, and they also like that to be acknowledged, don't they? Melina said the popular likes to be recognized, and when I think of being recognized with a popular, Melina, I'm not sure this is the way you meant it, but I personally think of if they're out on the street, somebody recognizes them, or they go into a restaurant and the owner recognizes them. They like that kind of attention. That's what I think of when you say being recognized. They also like to be recognized at work, but it doesn't really need to be focused on their work so much. They just like to be recognized. And Cheryl said recognition of a job well done, which I think is probably maybe for the perfect you were thinking of. Now I will also say the powerful likes that too, but they don't need it to be in front of other people. I'm a powerful. I love for people to tell me that was great. It was a good workshop. I got a lot out of it. I've had people say I've changed their lives. I print those off. I put them in a notebook, not to pat myself on the back, but to make myself realize on the bad days, and they do come, that there are people that get meaning out of what I do, because that's why I do what I do. So I print those things off and put them in a notebook for me. The popular would prefer to be recognized for those things out in public because they want other people to feel good about them as well. And Jemmy said the popular when people seem to like them and enjoy being around them. Absolutely. And they know that. It's obvious, right? They all gravitate toward the popular. That makes the popular feel good. That adds to their self-esteem. Sabrina said making people feel welcome and happy and helping others for the popular. Absolutely. That adds to their self-worth, doesn't it? Pats on the back for the popular. Yes, especially if it's in front of other people. And that doesn't make them bad people. It doesn't make any of us bad people when we have these ways that we perceive life. It just means that's who we are. Sheila said the melancholy, some asked for their opinion or to do something as they did well before. Yes, if I said to you, Sheila, you did a fabulous job on that Excel spreadsheet, Sheila's going to feel good about that. And I will also say to you, not just for the perfect or anybody else, but what gets rewarded gets repeated. So for instance, sometimes the popular, when they're working in their weaknesses, can be a little bit of a sniper and make snide remarks about people, and that sarcasm we talked about yesterday. So when they say something nice about somebody else, that's when you reward them with a compliment to try to encourage them to do that again. Not to be manipulative, but to make our lives better, because when we're all interacting at our best, then our lives are going to be better. So what gets rewarded gets repeated. Cheryl said, I need to know if I'm doing my job well. I'm a powerful. Yes. And I really don't need to have a lot of other people know. If you're like me, Cheryl, I just need to know I'm doing it well. That's the whole thing for me. And Ada said the popular likes compliments, a lot of praise, show a lot of enthusiasm when they're praising and trying to convince them to do something. Yes, because you like what they did or whatever. Absolutely, Ada. And the peaceful give them some space that contributes to their self-worth, but in that space, they also want to be part of the group. It doesn't mean they want to be disconnected. They want to feel like they're part of the group. They want to know they've contributed, but at a deeper level than just here's my numbers or here's my research. They really want to know that they've made a contribution here. So I think we've touched on most of the things that I said, the acknowledgement, the compliments, the applause, the kudos, all of those kinds of things for the popular sanguine makes them feel good. Think about this when you're interacting with people you know. Maybe at the workplace, that would be great if you used this information with people you worked with and made them feel good. Not falsely, as I said, not manipulatively, but just to make the workplace nicer. But think about it also with your children, with your significant other, with your friends, with people on a committee that you belong to, where you can just quietly add some things that add to people's self-worth. It makes people feel good. The powerful, what contributes to their self-worth? The quality of their work. Not quality from a standpoint of perfection, but to know it was meaningful. The impact of the results. The track record. The reputation. To know that they're making a difference, but not in, I don't know how to say this tactfully, and I am a powerful, but not in an emotional kind of way as much as my life made a difference kind of a way. Ada says, when they've done a good job, tell your supervisors repeat more than necessary sometimes if you understand your boss, so word gets back from someone whose influence and opinion is worth more than yours. Yes, because of your position in the hierarchy. Absolutely. Because everybody likes to hear it from somebody higher up, don't they, Ada? So the powerful, for their self-worth, they want to know that their work is making a difference from a productive standpoint. The perfect melancholy, they value precision, accuracy, the quality of their results based on it being perfect or excellent. The quality of the results for the powerful is more about the quality and how did it affect the bottom line. The quality for the perfect is more that it was done the way I asked for it to be done with perfection or excellence. So that's what contributes to their self-worth. And the peaceful's self-worth, they're looking, as I mentioned, for that contribution. They want to know that what they did was deep, that they are an integral part of this team, and they want to feel compatible with other people. So again, we go back to that piece where we were talking about drawing them out, because you have to include them in the discussion. They do not always volunteer. That's when they feel compatible with others, when people value their opinion, even though they might not have expressed it if someone hadn't asked. And I know that's frustrating for other people, especially a powerful. Because the powerful's thinking, if you have an opinion, just speak up. But the peaceful's thinking, well, apparently my opinion doesn't matter. And they don't say anything. They want to be compatible with others, and they want to have that depth of contribution. Okay. The last thing we're going to talk about is what do they struggle with? And when I say this, I mean in life. What causes a challenge for them in life? And I'm going to use the popular sanguine as an example, like I have on some of the others, because the popular sanguine struggles with rules. Remember, they don't get there at 9 o'clock, they get there at 9:05. They bend the rules as much as they can for patrons because they want the patrons to like them. They struggle with details because it really doesn't seem that important to them to get hung up on whether there were 2 or 3 people in the room at the time. And they struggle a little bit with authority figures because to them, What's the big deal? I'm not going to bow down and kiss anybody's ring because I'm just as good a person as they are. That's their sort of thought process, and they're totally right about that. But sometimes it's to the point where, because the attention is taken away from them by the authority figure, that they struggle with that authority figure because they like the attention. So understanding that, what do the others struggle with? Take a moment to think about that, type it into the chat box, and we'll be wrapping up the program here in just a few minutes. I'll pop back in here for a second just so everybody knows we're still here. And I see multiple attendees typing about what we struggle with, so I'm going to wait another moment for answers to pop up. Okay, I'm going to take a look at these answers here. Deborah says the perfect struggles with inconsistency. Absolutely. They don't like, let's do it this way today, let's do it this way tomorrow. Well, you could have done it this way too. What is the rule? That's what they're looking for, consistency. They also struggle with chaos from the standpoint of the same kind of a concept. They don't want things to be abstract. They want to know what the policy is. What should I be doing here? And if it's kind of up in the air, to them that's chaotic. That's why so many librarians are struggling with this concept of library being a place, library as place and where people want to be, and we're going to be a cultural center, or we're going to be a community center, we're going to be those things. That's more chaotic than what libraries in the past have been, isn't it? So it doesn't rest well with the perfects in the group. Diane said the peaceful struggles with speaking up when necessary. Absolutely. And Deborah said the powerful with being questioned. Yes, because you should not question those in charge, right? And the powerful always thinks they're in charge even when they're not, right, Deborah? And Jemmy said the popular taking things too seriously, and then she says you meant powerful. Yes, they struggle with things being all about the goal, the results, those kinds of things, never lightening up, right? I got you, Jemmy, that's okay. Cheryl said peaceful struggles with finding their voice or being a part of things. Lisa said the perfect take things too seriously sometimes. Absolutely. It's hard for them to lighten up too, isn't it? So the powerful and the perfect both struggle with taking things too seriously sometimes. And Ada said the peaceful extroverted is sometimes embarrassing and not professional. Unfortunately, in the worst case scenario, it might damage their reputation. Yes, it could. That would be more the popular than the peaceful. Usually the peaceful actually is often introverted. The peacefuls and the perfects are often introverted, and the powerfuls and the populars are often extroverted. Not always, but many times, and certainly the popular extrovert could embarrass themselves. Sheila said the powerful struggles with indecisiveness or indecisiveness in others. Yes, if I can't make a decision, I beat myself up. Why can't I decide about this? The powerful wants to be included. They would struggle with not being included. More even so in decision making, right, Cheryl? They don't need to be included going to the movies and all those kinds of things, but if there's going to be a decision, or we're going to set goals, or we're going to achieve something, I want to be there. So that's what they struggle with. And not being everyone's friend. Yeah, they're not everyone's friend, are they? And they don't care about that, and that can be a struggle in itself, because then they're perceived as cold and aloof. Yes, the struggle with popular and peaceful, right, Ada? And Sabrina said the perfect would struggle with not meeting deadlines, would struggle actually with themselves, wouldn't they, Sabrina, with not living up to their own expectations. It's a real challenge for perfects to do that. And Lisa said the popular get hurt when somebody doesn't like them. Absolutely. So all of the above that you have just mentioned, I have down for the powerful that they struggle with fuzzy thinkers, those people who can't think clearly and be decisive, and uncertainty. As somebody said earlier, the indecisiveness piece, not being certain about something. They don't like that. It either is or it is not, and let's move forward. So that's what they struggle with in life. The perfect struggles with somebody wanting a short, quick answer, or somebody watching over their shoulder, not doing their best work. Maybe they were rushed into something and they don't feel they produced their best work. Making a mistake, even in personal life. I have a lot of perfect in me. My husband has a lot of perfect in him. If we make a decision together and it's proven to be a mistake later, not life-threatening or anything like that, but just something we probably shouldn't have done, we beat ourselves up just mercilessly. And it's a shame because we both understand that, but still, as I mentioned, you can't stop the thoughts from coming, can you? So what I choose to do is stop the thoughts in their track once I know they're there and say, you know what, this is not serving me well and I'm not going to go there. The decision is made, it's in stone, there's nothing I can do, we're done. Cheryl said the perfect would be not seeing other people's strengths, only their weaknesses. Yes, being very critical, right? And I got you, Cheryl. See, I can read right in through your minds because you don't even have to type it well, and I can still know what you mean. But absolutely, the perfect tends to focus on people's weaknesses and their inability to do things to perfection, which nobody really can. The peaceful struggles with being overlooked or ignored. That's one of the things that really bothers them because then they feel left out. And that can be very frustrating for them. So all of the things that you mentioned, as well as these other things, are things that people really deal with on a daily basis based on which category they fall into and how high they are in that category. But we all struggle with something, don't we? We all have pieces of our personality that create barriers or obstacles for us to overcome. If we're aware of those, we bring them to the forefront. We say to ourselves, is this serving me well? Or as Dr. Phil used to say, how's that working for you? And if it's not serving you well, then you need to make the choice to say, you know what, I'm not going to beat myself up over that PowerPoint not being perfect because people do make mistakes. Now, if I get sloppy and I make a mistake on every other slide, then I deserve to beat myself up as far as I'm concerned as a powerful perfect because I should be paying more attention. So understand that you will have struggles and then you address those struggles and say, why am I feeling this way? What should I do with this feeling? And deal with it. Okay. Now, here's where I want you to think about who you are. And the first thing I want you to do in the middle of page 4 is circle which one you scored highest on. So if you're a popular sanguine, circle the popular sanguine. If you're the powerful, circle the powerful. Only circle the one you scored the highest in. Because we're going to talk about some steps we might need to take as that particular style to better interact with other people. So, if you're the popular sanguine, and I think Sabrina was a popular, if I remember right, and we might have somebody else in here that I might not be remembering. So if you're the popular, you tell us in the chat box, just the populars answer this one. What do you think you could do differently as a result of what you learned yesterday and today to interact better with other people? Just based on your own strengths and your own weaknesses. If you're the populars in the group, and we have one or two at least, I think, what could you do differently to let your personality serve you instead of taking over? Sheila's a perfect melancholy. Okay. But if you're the popular, let's start with the populars. Populars, are you out there? What could you do differently as a result of what you've learned yesterday and today? Okay. So here's what I'm thinking, and I know that's kind of put you on the spot. So I'm thinking that if you're a popular, you might want to try to listen more carefully because often that's one of the weaknesses of a popular. They tend not to listen because they're thinking what they want to say or what they want to share with somebody or the question they want to ask or whatever. So that might be one thing a popular would want to do after going through today's session and yesterday's session. Some of you, if you're populars, may need to become more organized because you find yourself just forgetting things or not doing things as well as you could have had you been more organized. And it's a skill you can learn. Sabrina says, I can listen, yes, and pay more attention to other people's points of view. I think we typed that at the same time I put that up, so you must have been thinking that all along, Sabrina. But absolutely, it's helpful to do that because you'll interact better with other people. Even if they are popular sanguines, you'll interact better with them. So becoming more organized might be an issue. And I'm not putting things up here that I think you have to do. I'm just putting suggestions up here for you to think about. Sometimes for the popular, dealing with other people, you might need to provide more details, especially if you're dealing with a peaceful from the standpoint of being specific with them about what you need. So that would require more details. This is not when you say, get it to me whenever you can. For the powerful, because they want facts and they want you to be certain, so you're going to provide more details. And of course for the perfect melancholy, because they live and breathe and die with details. So if you're a popular sanguine and you don't usually think about details, that might be an area that you could work on. If you're the powerful, now you see how this goes, and I know we have some powerfuls in the group. So if you're a powerful, what might you need to do to interact in a more effective way with these other styles? Would you go ahead and type that in, please? Jeremy says, develop more patience and compassion with dealing with other people. Amen. And I added the amen in case somebody's listening to this recording. Jemmy did not say that. But what I'm saying here is, from a powerful choleric, because that's what I am, I do need to develop more patience and compassion. Still, even though I've been working with this for over 15 years, I'm much, much better than I used to be, but I still fall back into my old patterns sometimes, especially if I'm stressed, or I'm frustrated, or I'm tired, or I'm hungry, or whatever it might be. Then I fall back into that impatience and lack of compassion for others sometimes. Cheryl says, take a softer approach rather than bulldoze. Absolutely, Cheryl. I'm right there with you. And I kind of temper that. Sometimes I need to bulldoze because I need to get something accomplished, and other times I need to back off. Sometimes that's based on how much control the other person has over my situation. And I need to back off so that I don't upset the apple cart, so to speak. And sometimes it's just that I want to build a relationship and I need to back off a bit. So that's exactly the kinds of things that I'm thinking about when I'm asking you to think through this from your perspective. I have developed more patience. Imagine that. Tone down the directness and ask more questions and be more approachable, because sometimes the powerful comes across as don't go there. Don't go into their office, don't approach them, etc. So sometimes the powerful needs to make themselves more open and willing to be approached. If you're a perfect in the audience today, what might you need to do differently? Go ahead and type that in. I see multiple attendees typing. I'm going to put up a couple of things while people are still typing. Whoops, I saw something pop up. Engage in more social interaction. And sometimes we have to force that, don't we, Deborah? Because it really doesn't interest us, especially if we are the introverted perfect melancholy, and many are. My highest is powerful, which is normally an extrovert, but I'm actually a high introvert. So my secondary perfect takes over and I'm more of an introvert, and I have to kind of force myself to engage in that social interaction. Lisa said, relax a little, don't take yourself so seriously, laugh at yourself, which is hard to do for a perfect because I made a mistake. I feel like crying, not laughing, right? And Sheila said, be aware of the many personal standards I've accumulated and expect of others. Yes. And are they necessary? Could they be toned down a bit? Should my expectations be what I expect of somebody else? All of the above. I have down, learn how to accept diversity. And I'm not talking about diversity from a standpoint of gender or age or culture or race or ethnicity. I'm talking about the diversity in our libraries nowadays of how we offer what we offer. It's very diverse compared to what it was even 10 years ago. how we handle our rules, how we handle whether people have to bring back their books or they get a fine, or whether we waive the fines, those kinds of things. Learn to accept that. Maybe diversity isn't the right word, but more flexibility might be a good word. Be more open, as somebody mentioned, more social interaction, and communicate more. Perfect melancholies tend to think inside their own heads, and people don't know what they're thinking, and it comes across as being aloof and withdrawn, so we need to be able to communicate more. If you're a peaceful phlegmatic in the room, and we probably have a few of you, we did yesterday, what might you need to do as a result of what you've learned? And I see people typing here. Ask for help from coworkers when feeling overwhelmed. Great point. It makes you feel kind of vulnerable, doesn't it, Diane? But most of the time, if people think that you've really given your best, they're more than willing to help. Now, if they think you're sitting there with your feet propped up on the desk eating bonbons and watching reruns of Law and Order on your phone, then they're probably not going to help. But if they see you've made the effort, they'll be happy to help, but they don't know you need the help unless you ask. I'm going to pop a few up here while we're waiting because I don't want to run you too late today. Some peacefuls need to become a little more assertive, a little more direct, a little more willing to speak up. They might need to cope with change a little more proactively because they like that consistency, but there is no such thing as consistency in the library today. And they need to be careful of carrying everyone else's burdens because people will unload on you because you're a good listener. So just be aware of that and step back a little bit and say, wait a minute, I don't mind listening to people, but I can't take this on. So, the next question is, have you become more aware of a strength of one of your co-workers whose personality is different than yours based on what we've talked about today? If so, jot it down under number 4, just to remind yourself that even though they're different, it doesn't mean they don't have strengths. Sabrina says this was extremely helpful and fun. Coming from a popular, yay! I have a better understanding of the different personalities that are under my supervision. Oh, that's good, Sabrina, because it makes a big difference when you're a supervisor for sure. So write down the strength of one of your coworkers. Think about the most important things specifically that you've learned in these 2 sessions. And at the bottom of the page, what are you going to do with that information at work and at home? Ada said not to be so afraid to ask questions and learn how to approach the correct person. Try to get more involved in different activities so I can understand how to function better, and try not to be so nonchalant, and practice self-discipline. All good advice for probably all of us. And don't forget, you have me at your disposal anytime from now until the day I don't do this anymore, which I can't foresee ever happening because I love it. So drop me an email if you ever need any help with this topic or anything else that I do. And I do have one question for you before you check out. Carol Ann and I were talking that we want to develop some face-to-face programs for you. Would you please fill out the evaluation that you get after today's session and let Carol Ann know what kinds of face-to-face workshops you would enjoy and would be able to attend so that she can schedule the things that work for her membership. Thank you, everybody. If you need me, you know how to reach me, and I look forward to seeing you again in the future, either at a webinar or a face-to-face workshop. Don't forget to fill out your evaluation.
This was fabulous. As I mentioned, we're going to all review the slides again and put in practice at least 2 things that you've recommended this week, and we really appreciate you spending the last 2 days with us. Everyone, I think you agree this has been just terrific, and we really thank you, Linda, and we look forward to seeing you very soon. Bye-bye. We'll see you again.
Thanks, everybody.